Mayor Michael, the top shirt's for you, doll, and the rest I just brought. So these are the old ones. You that coat right here. Hi, Lydia. Yeah, well, you know I love you guys. Send me your logo. Because I can't remember everything. All right. I'm going to close out with this. There's also some flyers for the festival coming up in San Jacinto. It's not till June, but, we get busy. I'm going to close out with this. I'm going to put on my college professor hat, and I'm going to throw you guys down some stuff, because I love today, okay? From a humanistic perspective, is my team ready? Because I'm getting ready to exit. All right. Hi, Glenn. I don't want to look at the audience, sorry. From a humanistic perspective, we are all unique, and each and every one of us has assets. To hate someone from afar that you have never met, that you do not know, simply means one should look inward, locate those assets. Hate is certainly not healthy. I hear I might have a hater or two in my atmosphere. I gotta go, y'all, because apparently you heard MTV Hammer playing out there in my car. You can't touch this. Cheers. How are you doing, girl?
Thanks, Connie.
Oh, it's my turn.
Wow.
Good evening.
Hi. Forgot it was my turn. Hi, welcome. So, I am here back where I started speaking on water. I received my water bill. Now, the crazy thing is last month it was 28 days. This month it's 35 days. However, the difference in my cost was 4 cents. 4 cents. That is, I should buy a lottery ticket. If I can come within 4 cents of the same amount of water that I used last month, and I don't know how that works. But anyway, since I haven't been able to get the answers to the questions that I've been asking for a year of how this whole water system works and how it gets charged and how they do the billing, I'm asking if I can have a field trip. And I would like to do it with the water department. And I would like to be able to go from where they read the meter or however they get my numbers, and then where does that go, and then how does it go into the whole department, and then how do they figure out what they charge, and then it all comes down to the end of what my bill is. Because I have been asking this question for over a year now. The whole reason why I started coming was, why am I getting charged so much money for water? And nobody's been able to answer me in something that I can understand, because to me it's just talking in circles. So I would like to know if it is possible for me to be able to do a field trip with somebody from the water department that can walk me through, so I have a better understanding of how I'm being charged, because it is beyond me that my bill is only 4 cents off from a 28-day to a 35-day. And then how do we figure out, like, when is it 35 days and when is it 28 days? And I'm not sure about that either. So if it's possible, I would love to have that happen so I can stop talking about the water, because I'm kind of up over my head in water, and I would like to stop talking about it. So if it is all possible, that would be awesome.
Submit your written request to the city manager's office.
Thank you.
Up next, sir.
Andrea Bedrock. That's the last one.
Good evening.
Mayor Percival, City Council, good to be back again. Haven't seen you in a while. At the risk of being typecast, I'd like to talk about bingo. This is a rarity with me. Okay, I'm vice president of the HOA at Heather Estates. We were voted most likely to go extinct this year, so you'll probably not be hearing a whole lot more from us. However, I would like to know how things work. I mean, you guys pass the laws, you implement the codes, right? And then the city police implement those laws. Is that kind of the way it works? Am I right here? Because we're having a continual problem getting a bingo license. And apparently, we are being singled out as an HOA. And I'm really tired of it. I talked to our attorney this week, and the attorney said, yes, it looks to me like the city is discriminating against your HOA. So I want you to send me all the information. I want you to go to the city council one more time, tell them what's going on, and then get everything over to me. So I'm going to tell you one more time what's happening. First of all, the city illegally gave a for-profit company, our mobile home park, they gave them a bingo license. That was against the law. They should never have done that. They did that, and they refused our license at the same time. We both went there at the same time. Jackie ripped up our Sharon ripped up our application and said, we're going with this one. And that was Bartoli, who owns our property, our mobile home park. So Mr. Bartoli, who owns the mobile home park, got a bingo license. And it wasn't until I pitched a fit about it that the city police investigated and said, you know what, Andrea, you're right. They should never have gotten one. And guess what? You're not going to get one either. Now, they didn't tell me that. But what happened was I went down to get a bingo license. And they said, oh, yeah, Heather Estates, you're going to need to go to then Deputy Chief Webb and talk to him. Well, I went over there and hello, I know he's back there. I talked to Sergeant Gibbs and he said, yeah, well, you know what? Actually, the city is not giving out any more bingo licenses. Now, you guys would have had to make that decision, and I went back and I checked, and I couldn't find any minutes where you guys made that decision. It looks to me like the police unilaterally took it upon themselves to not enforce something that was on the books. So they told me point blank, we have decided to check to see if this actually fits with state policy. And we're not giving anybody in Hemet a license until we find out what's going on. Well, I went back to business license a week later, and guess what was readily available? Bingo applications. So I picked one up. I put on a disguise so they wouldn't recognize me. I picked one up and I went over to Sharon with my dollar. And I said, hello, Sharon. We would like a bingo license. Here's my dollar. And she goes, okay, no problem. We're going to give you a bingo. Ooh, Heather Estates. Yeah, there's issues with Heather Estates. And I said, issues? What issues? You're going to have to talk to Jackie about that. And Jackie came in. She goes, Andrea, there's no issues. And she shot a look like you wouldn't believe it. Like, shut up. No, there's no issues. You just simply have to go see Police Chief Webb. I went over there again. Same story. You know what? We're taking a look at this. We're not giving this out to anybody. If my attorney finds out that people are getting bingo licenses and we were not given a bingo license, this is going to court. And I am not coming back another time. We deserve a bingo license. My God, we deserve it better than a for-profit company. We are absolute. We have seniors that are not playing bingo now. They all want to play bingo. They're retired, and we're being prevented from getting that license by the police department and the city.
Thank you for your comments. Okay. All right. No more comments from the public. Up next is a public hearing, item number 14, request for a waiver of development impact fees for Habitat for Humanity. Deanna, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is a request from Habitat for Humanity for a waiver of development impact fees for a property at 354 North Palm Avenue. Little background regarding the property. It is a proposed construction, about a 1,300 square foot single-family home on Palm, south of Oakland. The lot was originally donated to Habitat, and it was large enough to which they could get a zone change and a parcel map for a lot split so that they could construct 2 homes. One of the homes has already been constructed, and a deserving family has been living there. And the map is recorded, and now they're ready to build the second home on that remaining property. However, given the increases in construction costs and materials, as well as the amount of local and regional permit fees, they're requesting some relief from those fees. This is an aerial photo, just shows you a little bit of the site. That's Palm, that runs north-south there. In this particular area, doesn't show the existing home, but the existing home is towards the east. So there's the parcel map. So the existing home again is on parcel 1, and the new home would be on parcel 2. All of the street improvements are in on Palm, and the sidewalks and all of those infrastructure improvements in front of the home are already in place. So the request, as I mentioned, is to waive what is called development impact fees. Development impact fees are adopted by many cities throughout the state. They're intended to mitigate or help mitigate the cost of new development citywide. It could be commercial, industrial, or residential. There are a number of fees in different categories for streets or signals or fire, police, parks, etc. And these add to help us be able to fund a lot of the projects that are in your capital improvement program. The total fee, and in your staff report we have a breakdown of all the fee categories, but the total development impact fees requested to be waived is $10,468. The applicant is seeking to waive, also looking at waiving the TUMP fee, which is one of the larger fees. It's over $8,000. That's a pass-through fee, so the city collects it, but we give it to Western Regional Council of Government, or WRCOG, that forms Regional Transportation Improvements. We don't have the capability to waive that fee. However, there are provisions in the TUMP ordinance that do allow for exemptions for certain affordable housing requirements. We think this has a good opportunity to be able to meet that. My understanding is they're also requesting a fee reduction or waiver from Hemet Unified School District, and maybe Coca could report on any status with that. All other building permit and inspection fees, which actually in reality are fairly minor in terms of the mix, would be charged, as well as utility connection fees for sewer and water. So the recommended action from staff is that the City Council grant the development impact fee waiver request for the following reasons. We've had a long-standing and very positive relationship with Habitat for Humanity. They've built over 20 such homes within the valley. They've always done an excellent job in terms of making sure in their selection of their families, and that they're caring for the properties, and we don't ever have any code cases or any issues with Habitat homes. It does provide a very welcome mechanism for people to engage in sweat equity on their own homes and volunteer labor in order to achieve home ownership. Habitat's one of the few programs, actually the only one I'm aware of, that provides for low-income single-family homes. Most of what you hear about for subsidized or assisted for low-income projects are usually multifamily, and they're usually rental. So Habitat's unique in that it's single-family homes, and the program design is for home ownership and long-term home ownership. With the state abolishing redevelopment agencies, the city has very limited options to assist affordable housing in any capacity. So this is one of the few mechanisms that might be available to us. Additionally, because it is a low-income home and they're being able to construct at this level, it will count for our RHNA numbers, our regional housing needs allocation. The loss of the DIF funds, of course, we like to have all those funds for our capital improvements, but for this one home will not unreasonably burden the city's ability to provide the required infrastructure improvements citywide. and the home will contribute to the property tax base. So without some fee relief and deferral, if the home is not built, then you have a vacant property, and as opposed to a productive property with a family living in it. So that, in consultation with the city manager, that is our recommendation to grant the approval. I'm sure Mr. Coca's here, or Coca's here, I'm sorry, and could tell you more about the project and about their organization, as I'm sure you're very familiar with them. They're happy to answer any questions at this time.
Very good. Thank you, Deanna. I know the council's going to have some questions. I know, Coca, you're going to want to come up and speak, but one of the things I do want to point out to the community and to council and staff is that they did a project on Latham and just west of Tockwitz, and those I don't know how long those have been there. I know they've been there at least 5 years, but probably longer. But those are still the best looking houses in that area. And so, I know that you guys do a great project and get good families in there. So with that, are there any questions of staff or the applicant?
I have a question for the applicant. So can you explain to us how the deed is locked in as far as like when the family lives there, if the family moves, and then what happens to the house afterwards? I'm just looking long-term with the fees and all that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, city staff, and fellow residents. Thank you for allowing us to put on our request. I was actually hoping you would have any questions for me, and I would send in the student leaders here that can come up here. But to answer your question, it's a great question, by the way. When we choose a family, just so the audience understand, Robin is smiling. She was one of the founders of this organization in this valley. When we choose the family, we make sure they are here legally. They have no criminal record. They have a decent credit. They have 2 years of consistent proof of income, so working families. And one thing I added to that is families with children. That's what my passion is. So that's how we select them. And when we do the grand deed, the way it's done is, by the way, these folks are not getting these homes for free. They're actually paying for the house. The difference is we're all volunteers, so the expense of actual materials and actual cost is what they pay. And they pay over 30 years, and it's interest-free. So typically a 4-bedroom brand new single-family home costs them about approximately $400 a month. That's their mortgage. So it's just incredible. So when we do this grand deed, we have a deed for actual amount, that's the actual cost of the house. And there's a second trust deed, which is held by Habitat also. And the second trust deed basically says they need to live there for 30 years. The amount is the difference between the cost of the house and the appraised value of the house. So most of the time it's about 80, 100,000 sometimes or more. So the reason we do that is because we're trying to help these families with the children have a decent home to live and they become productive citizens. But we do not want them to make profits. So if we did not have that, they can turn around and sell the house and make $100,000, and there goes the whole what we're trying to accomplish. So that's pretty much what happens there.
Are there any other questions? Comments?
Yeah, question for staff on the, you mentioned that primarily development impact fees apply to infrastructure. So my question is, you commented that the one parcel's already been completed and that the infrastructure is in place. So that's kind of offset by waiving the DIF fees, right?
Well, the DIF fees really are based on kind of citywide master plan improvements and programs. So it's a fair share contribution towards various street widenings and
not-
signals and
Not
everything.
unique to that one site.
Correct.
Okay.
And I was just mentioning that so that you would know that at least for this property, everything is there and in place and the deferral is not going to result in those improvements not being there.
And is there any concern about precedent being set for future developments coming and asking for something similar?
That's always a concern as a precedent. We talked about that. And that's why I tried to lay out why we thought Habitat was different and what that they could provide and why this waiver request we thought was fairly modest, actually, in terms of those development impact fees and the support for the program. In terms of our regional housing needs obligation, it's becoming more and more constraining by the state of California, and as opposed to just being affordable sites offered in our housing element, there's going to be more and more requirements upon city to fulfill those. So I think that this is an excellent way to try and meet that low-income housing contribution.
Okay. I'd just like to offer an observation that shortly after I retired, I had an opportunity to work on a Habitat for Humanity project and got to see firsthand community members coming together from all aspects of the community, all walks of life, and particularly the family members, including their children, that were on site daily, putting forth that sweat equity. And my observations, there was actually 4 homes that were being built simultaneously. My observations are exactly what the mayor's comment was. This is a totally different community, different county, but the neighborhood in which those homes were constructed, those homes remain the most attractive, most maintained, best maintained of all the ones surrounding. So I've seen firsthand the benefit that can be derived at multi-levels, both aesthetically and from community spirit and the pride of ownership that can be garnered through people participating in the construction of their own home. So I'm an advocate for these kinds of projects.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Deanna, had you had a chance to speak with WRCOG about this at all?
No, I haven't spoken with them personally. However, I did look in the handbook and the guidelines, and it does have a provision for low-income home ownership as well as for rentals. And what they do look for is a long-term, commitment or deed restriction or something like that. So I think that with providing that kind of a documentation, that we could certainly support that.
Any other comments from council? Okay. This is a public hearing, so did you have anything else to say?
I just want to make a couple of comments. First of all, I want to thank Deanna. I saw her staff report that she put together. I think she needs to help us with these presentations in the future. She's done a better job than I could. It's awesome. But, I know Councilman Brown just mentioned about, and even Mayor was talking about it. Not only the houses that we all volunteers build together, which some of you have actually taken part in it, but when we do that, the neighborhood changes. When we started building those houses on Latham, the owners across from there actually came and talked to me and said, hey, we're going to do our part. We're going to clean up. And if you remember how it was 5-6 years ago versus how it is today, it's a big difference. So I think there is a need for these low-income families. I mean, the people I want to help are people that, help themselves. They're actually working, so I would like to help them. And this is one way that we want to give back to the community and to the city. And I want to thank all of you for allowing this opportunity. And I'll be here if you have any questions. I think, one other speaker, and he already claimed that he's a better MC than I am. I think some of you there that day. And I saw at the marathon kickoff also, he seemed to be taking more, he's doing a better job than I am, so I'll let him continue here.
Very good. This is a public hearing, so I will open the public hearing. If there's anybody that would like to speak on this item, you can do so now. Do you have any?
Yes, Krishna would like to speak.
Okay. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Honorable Mayor, council members, and staff. My name is Krishna Koka, and I am the co-president of the Hemet High School Student Chapter for Habitat for Humanity. I'm here to support and request all of you to kindly approve the fee waiver Habitat for Humanity is requesting. As you are all aware, Habitat for Humanity provides decent shelters for hardworking families with children. On behalf of the Hemet High School Habitat for Humanity Student Chapter, I thank you. Have a great evening.
Thank you, sir. Sir, do you have anybody else that would like to speak? Is there anybody that would like to speak?
Just real quick. Habitat for Humanity is a great organization. But then again, you know, I get about 5 calls a day from fantastic organizations. You know, the Audubon Society, World Wildlife Fund. I mean, they inundate my phone all day. And I keep telling my husband's Native American. He wants to give to all of it. He's like, oh, we have to help the animals. But I have to tell him, we can't afford to do it. So I don't, just with all due respect, this city is operating in the red. We can't afford this kind of stuff. You can't give away a waiver if you don't have the money to do it. That's just my opinion.
Thank you. Anybody else that'd like to talk for or against? Okay, seeing none, I will close the public hearing. I have one more question for you, Koka. Yes, is that if the council doesn't approve the fee waiver, how long will it take before you can start construction on this house?
Well, the truth of the matter is we started the foundation for this particular project a 3 months ago. And when we saw the total fees, it's almost at 1/3 or 40% of the house construction. We just can't afford it. You know, we are Hemet. You know, we're serving in Hemet San Jacinto, and you know, for us to come up with that kind of funds, it's just not possible. So probably a very long time. I actually retired as the president of Habitat for Humanity last year, and our wonderful vice president at that time, Lorena, stepped up as the president, and she said she's having way too much fun, and she resigned last week. So you got me back again as the acting president until somebody else is willing to step up. And I'm trying to make light of it. The thing is, when you're spending money, what impact does it do? What is it doing for? Are you investing in something, or are you just blowing money in bingo? So you're talking about investment in the families and children and everything else. So that, and I shouldn't have said the bingo, but you know what I mean. I like to go to Vegas and blow money, so that's what I meant by. So we're trying to help these children have a decent place. And I tell you, I think all of you have known what goes on out there. One of the things that we do is the final interview. I personally try not to go, but I get dragged in and I go for the final interview. And when I go there to interview these families, you walk in and you see people living in 2-bedroom apartment. 1 bedroom has 4 kids in it. In the 2nd bedroom, mother, father, and a child. And then you have metal, wrought iron fencing around the windows and doors and bullet-ridden walls. I mean, come on, we are the United States of America. We're not a third world country. So, you know, we're not helping someone that doesn't deserve it. You know, that's my opinion. We need to help people to make themselves better. And, you know, like Diana was mentioning, in fact, if you go back to the project the mayor was talking about on Latham, you can ask our police chief back then, Dave Brown, who's retired, or you can probably ask our new chief, Webb, he'll tell you. They used to send cops there all the time because there were gang violence going on, drug sales, prostitution, all kinds of things. So not only did we put half a dozen families in there with children, we actually cleaned up that area. I mean, that's what I feel. And as a citizen of this country and a resident of this great city, we should do what we can to help.
Thank you.
Okay. It was last summer, wasn't it, when the other house was finished?
Correct.
When we were there. Was there a significant increase in these fees this time over the last house?
It definitely feels that way. Because when I looked at the fees and, so, you know, we go by what funds we raise.
Mm-hmm.
And then we see how much we have, if we can build a house or not. It's hard to build new houses, I understand, but this is like, Deanna, I know I keep referring to her because you don't have too many organizations that are doing this.
Right.
I mean, we can also step back and say we're going to do Brush for Kindness, which is come and paint somebody's house a little bit or fix their door and call it, yes, we have done something good for the community. But like I said, my passion is children in need, and that's who I want to help. I want them to grow up to be good citizens and be productive and turn around and help the community again.
There we go. I want to point out a couple things, is that this is an opportunity for goodwill, and we are all talking about how we want to see our community improve and for the betterment of our community and see it safer and get rid of blight. This property is vacant now, and the infrastructure for this particular house is already in the street. The street's there, the sidewalks are in, so there's minimal impact as far as having to, you don't have to go redo the road or redo the sidewalk, and the tax benefit that will be better over time for the city if this project's done now than if it's done in 5 years. We're going to have 5 years ahead of the game on collecting increased property taxes. Not to mention now we have a family that's in a home that has more disposable income to spend in our city to pay our sales tax to help fund police and fire. So from my perspective, and not to mention that California has a housing shortage, a huge housing shortage by 180,000 units a year. And so if we can build one more home, or hopefully way more, but we got to start somewhere, and I think that this is an opportunity for the city to provide some goodwill to a family and a community, because as I mentioned earlier, the homes that were built on Latham have had a net benefit to that community where those homes are.
Well, and it's been a proven success.
Absolutely.
So, you know, we don't have to wonder how it'll end up or the benefit it is to the city. We know it's a benefit to the city.
Absolutely.
I think that's a great point. When we were building the first house on this side on Palm Avenue, we had, I think, 9 burglaries during construction. You know, so having a house there and a family living there made a difference there, and having another family there would make even more difference.
So with that, is there any other things anybody wants to add? Okay, there's a motion.
Second.
And a second. Let's vote. There you go.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Okay, up next. Item 15, update from Police Department on staffing and Central Post-Release Accountability. Chief Webb. How are you, sir? How are you? Well.
Mr. Mayor, Council, good evening. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to make a quick presentation tonight. I will try to keep it quick because when the mayor originally asked me to give a presentation on staffing and an update, our conversation kind of moved into AB 109 and some of the effects that had on our community specifically, but in the state of California. We are lucky enough to have a team that's specifically, it's a task force that's based out of our offices here in Hemet that specifically targets AB 109 issues. So once I give my presentation, I'm going to have Sergeant Young, who commands that task force, come up and give a quick overview of what they're doing, some case studies, and how that's really affecting us. So I'll try to buzz through this pretty quickly. As you know, in January of 2017, the council voted to kickstart the Measure U before the funding had actually occurred. During that time, we were authorized to hire 8 police officers, a Special Operations Bureau lieutenant, and 2 community services officers. Those were all accomplished within that 6-month period of time, which gave us a real leg up on what we're doing now. So in the first year, which started at the fiscal year, we were authorized to hire 2 of our officers and a ROCS CSU sergeant. So our ROCS team is our Restoring Our Community Strategy team. They're the team that deals with specifically our quality of life issues. Some of our homelessness, they have contact with our homeless population daily. Our crime suppression unit is the unit that specifically targets street level crimes such as prostitution, our drug offenses, and things like that. So during that time, we were authorized to hire 2 of the sergeants, 4 of the officers, and 2 dispatchers. Mission accomplished, except all on the officer side. The last time I gave this presentation, we were at 3. We had 1 graduate from the academy, and after a day here, he said, hey, I'm not cut out to do this job, so he left. So now we're back at 4. So by the end of this fiscal year, I'm hoping to hire those 4. We have 5 or 6 in background currently right now that are laterals, and we're still processing entry level also. So I'm hoping that we can accomplish this task also by the end of the year. So the reality is within the first year and a half, all of our authorized positions, we have been able to hire 18 out of the 21. So I would still say that that's a pretty successful, considering some of the challenges that we're now seeing with hiring police officers. It's a very competitive market. Every single department up and down the state's hiring right now. And when the economy's good, we find out for some reason people don't really want to get into law enforcement. So we have a few challenges that we're dealing with right now. One thing we're working on is having an academy and a lateral blend. Laterals are officers that come from other departments with experience. Our academy entry level people are have no experience. So we hire them and send them through the 6-month academy. So we're finding that we get a real good blend of our organization. We're able to keep our kind of the way we operate, the way we do our go about our daily chores with our entry level folks. They learn the way, the Hemet PD way. And our laterals bring in other information and opportunities that they've had at other organizations. So it's a real good blend, and we're finding that that's been very helpful. This isn't true because we just hired Dave McDonough from the Sheriff's Department, who has 17 years on, so the numbers would actually go up. But this just puts it in a quick perspective for you that out of 8 out of our 9 laterals that we've just hired, 86 years of experience. They come from 8 different departments. And easily, we're estimating that it's over an $8 million investment. So it really hurts when you lose an officer from your department that's been with you for a while, because we have a tremendous amount of time, effort, and money invested in them. So that's a windfall for us if we can take these officers from other agencies, and we've been really successful doing that. We've also found that generally our academy people that are graduating are all doing really well and are coming out in the top third of their class, which is something that we should really be proud of. Some of the academies now we're running 90 people through them. So to come out in the top third is really, really good. So just to touch on these real briefly, our crime trends are going down across the board. Total crime is down about 5% right now in the city of Hemet. This is 2017 statistical data. So just realize that as a police chief, I'm always very careful about coming up and saying, hey, look what we did. Because there's all kinds of different things that play into crime stats. One of them is policing. One of them is community policing. One's the way we go about our business. But certainly there's unemployment rates and economy and the weather, all kinds of other things that come into play. Good news is we're seeing it trend down. So that's something to be proud of. It's also our crimes data is trending down quicker than the surrounding areas around us. Just to touch on what we're doing and how busy we are, over 80,000 calls for service last year. That's officers actually going to calls. 3,600 plus arrests. That's up 44%. That's an important number that I'll touch on in just a few minutes. We took over 12,000 police reports, and in our little call center over here, we took over 170,000 calls last year, phone calls coming in. So our call center is very busy. So what's this mean, right? What's it mean when I say, hey, we've hired 18 people? A lot of people think, well, how does that really affect me? Well, some of it I've already talked about, but let me tell you what we're doing. Our ROCS officers, this is our ROCS team, and these guys go out every single day and really try to make a difference in the community. Like I said, they deal a lot with the homeless people. And our mantra right now at Hemet PD is, hey, we're gonna be compassionate. We're gonna help you if you're homeless, if you want to get off the street. And we've had some really successes in doing that. We'll get them to the VA. We'll get them out to Victory Ranch. We'll put them on a bus if they have family somewhere that they want to get to. All these things we've done, and we've really formed partnerships with our community partners. But we also put the message out that, hey, we're not going to let you be here and use drugs and sleep on the doorstep of someone's business. So on one hand, we're compassionate. On the other, we're not going to let the lawlessness continue. So the word is definitely out on the street. We got calls from, I know Indio, I know Paris, and I know San Jacinto, that some of our local people that were causing problems have ended up in their jurisdictions now. They're wondering what we're doing. So, part of it's those 400 quality of life arrests that this team has made in a short period of time. And we're trying to do things that are a little out of the box and not really ordinary in police work. You know, when I was working the street, when Russ was working the street, we just go out and make an arrest and the problem's taken care of. We can't necessarily do that now because they're released quickly from being in custody. So we have to find other ways to do our job. One of the ways, these guys, our team went out and they bought their lunch, and instead of eating in a restaurant or whatever, they'll take it to the park and they'll eat with the park. You'd be amazed how quickly the park clears out when our officers show up and decide that they're going to eat their Subway sandwich there or whatever. So one of the other things that we're doing through this team is we're targeting properties. And some of the properties we have our ROCS, originally when we put our ROCS program into effect, we made about 14 municipal codes which really help us out as far as nuisance properties. And so what that means is that if we continue to be called to properties for drug-related offenses, gang-related offenses, assaults, whatever that is, when they hit a certain threshold, our team puts together a package, and they bring me the package, and I can declare, per the municipal code, that's a nuisance property. We give the owner of the property a letter and saying, hey, you've now been qualified for nuisance property, congratulations. And every time we show up now at your home, it's a $1,000 fine. So we're finding we're having really good success with them quickly taking care of whatever problem it is, which then in turn cuts down on a lot of our calls for service to that location. So once again, really, really positive thing. One of the other things that the staffing, the 18 people that we've been able to staff has helped us do is form a CIT or a crisis intervention team. We're one of 2 agencies in the county that runs a crisis intervention team. And what that is that we actually have a mental health clinician riding along with one of our officers in a unit. And they ride out there 40 hours a week. So what they do is that they respond to any one of our, what we call 5150 or mental health crisis type calls. Last year we had over 600 of those types of calls. So the great thing is rather than them just place them into care for a mental health evaluation, is that they're able to start basically a case and act as a caseworker. They make sure that person takes their medication. They'll do a follow-up with family and make sure that they're going to their appointments. And they really have had some strong successes on finding appropriate areas for people that have mental health issues. So once again, hats off to the council for supporting that, but one of 2 in the county. And the county actually pays for the clinician. So it's really a win-win for us, and we've seen a tremendous benefit. So remember, with those 18 officers, we're able to deploy our teams back out again, once again, to handle our crimes that we were seeing. But we also got our staffing levels up on our patrol shifts. So our patrol shifts now, remember we said there were 44% up in arrest rates. It's because now they don't just strictly have to chase calls. They have a little bit of time in the day where they can go out and be proactive. So we're seeing a real success with that. One last story, we had this last week. This was a man and his daughter that came out here. Their plans fell through, so they ended up basically homeless on our streets for a few weeks. They got with Officer Marshall from our ROCKS team, and because we have relationships with Project Hope, United Way, Valley Restart, we were able to buy them a ticket, and they're headed back to their family back in Alabama right now. So another good success story that could have ended, tragically. You never know what's going to happen when you're on the street. So with that, I know that was really quick, but I really want you to hear Randy. But I'll take any quick questions if you have any. Thanks. Randy? This is Sergeant Young. He's been with our department for many, many years, and he runs our PAC team. So I'll let him tell you all about it when we get this set up.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of City Council. Like you said, I'm Sergeant Randy Young. I'm currently in command of the Central PAC Task Force. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but first, the direction I had was that you guys wanted to get a little bit of information about AB 109 and Prop 47 and their effects on local community. So that's where we're going to start, is with AB 109. AB 109, or the Public Safety Realignment Act, got its roots because of lawsuits on the state of California for prison overcrowding. What happened was the inmates were claiming that they weren't getting proper treatment because of the overcrowding. It's a violation of the cruel and unusual punishment clause of the United States Constitution. As a result of that, the rulings dictated that they had to reduce their staffing in state penitentiaries by 1/3 by 2014. There's only two ways to make that happen. You either have to build more jails or you have to let people go. Their solution was to move some 70% of their, what they considered lower level inmates and make them county responsibilities, pushing them down the line. So they call this realignment, and so that's what we're dealing with now. So to talk about it, let's look at before and after AB 109 to see how the criminal justice system is working. Okay, before realignment, a convicted criminal would go to a sentencing hearing to determine the most appropriate action based upon that person's entire criminal history. He'd be sentenced based upon all of that information. All the felons would be housed in one of the 33 state penitentiaries or state prisons, and eventually most of them would become eligible for parole. When they get on parole, they're placed under the supervision of a parole agent, and if they ever violate that, the parole agent will order them on a hold. They'll go back to state prison, where eventually they're going to go before a parole board who's going to examine the violation and determine how long of a sentence for punishment that they're going to get for that violation. It was typically 90 days, but up to a year that they could get for that violation. And during that same time, county jails were dedicated for only the misdemeanors, less than a year in jail. So that was all that they had to worry about, and that's all they were built for, quite frankly. Since that time, and since AB 109 came into effect, this has all changed. Now when a criminal is convicted, they don't look at his criminal history, they only look at that specific violation that he was arrested for. So you might have someone with multiple attempted murders or a very violent criminal history, but he's arrested for a non-violent offense. He suddenly is determined to be a non-violent offender and not a danger to our community. So what they end up doing is they place them into one of 3 different categories of felonies that they kind of split this up as. Okay, the first one is our lower level people. It's 1170Hs is what they're called. They're the lower level people. They're the drug cells, our typical thieves, the people that affect the cities, the citizens of Emmett quite frequently, and they're the annoying felonies that cost us a lot of money and cost the citizens a lot of grief, but they're not really violent. Those people have moved strictly to county custody. They serve a felony sentence in the county jail system. In Riverside, there's one that's serving for 13 years, taking up a bed that was designed for short-term misdemeanors. So the system does not have the capacity to handle that. The next level is, they're called PRCS. They're considered non-serious, non-violent, and non-sex offenders. How those work is they still go to state prison, but when they're released, they come out onto county probation. And once they get out of prison, they're never touched by the state again. The county handles everything from that point on. The last one are typically the violent offenders that we've always known. And those violent offenders go to prison and come out onto state parole just like they did before. The one distinction is, though, nobody ever goes back to prison on that violation. Even on a parole violation, they still go back to county jails. When one of those PRCS people gets a violation nowadays, what happens is they typically go on what's called a flash incarceration. It's a grown-up version of timeout. They go to jail for 2 to 10 days, and then they get released right back on the street. For specific, for serious violations, the probation officer that they're under their care can actually go and petition the court. It's kind of like a new court case. You have to go back into court. You get the public defenders and everything to try and get them violated. And that violation can only be for 180 days maximum upon conviction of that. So what did it do? This is what happened for as a result of AB 109. During the first 6 months of the implementation of AB 109, the prison population dropped by 40,000, bringing them within the mandate. That mandate is that they had to be down to 137.5% of design capacity for the jails. You see at the end there's another drop-off there. That's Prop 47, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. I do want to talk about this chart. It was prepared by Magnus Lofstrom. He's a senior fellow for the Public Policy Institute of California. He conducted a study in 2016 that showed that AB 109 had little effect on recidivism. They're still committed, 70% of them are still getting thrown back into jail in some way. But he also said that there wasn't an appreciable increase in violent crime, so that's a good thing. He did admit that there was an increase in property crimes and specifically auto thefts. He defended that through a cost-benefit analysis, however, by saying that, according to the LA Times, that the $60,000 annual price tag of incarcerating someone is higher than the societal cost of auto theft. Now, this has been looked at by many people, and this study has been referred to saying AB 109 is a success. I'm going to present a counterpoint just to this thing. I have 3 problems with this study. The first one is that if recidivism rates, like he says, are constant, but the person's in jail less time, therefore the frequency of violations have to necessarily be increased. You can't have the person out quicker and still committing the same percentage of a crime without there being a corresponding increase. Another thing is I have a problem with this cost-benefit analysis study because it only makes sense and it's only valid if the state actually gave that money back and absorbed the true costs of the crime that these people are committing. In this case, the state of California is continuing to keep the taxpayers $60,000 for that housing, but they're not providing it, and the additional crime is being borne by us citizens. So there is a real value that he's not considering. He's just looking at from the state side. The last one, and this is the one that concerns me, is he's ignoring the historical trend before AB 109 when he did his presentation. And I'm going to show you why. This is what his chart would look like. This is the FBI Uniform Crime Reports, the same data that Chief was talking about. And this is the section that he took. I've recreated his chart. That brown trend line that goes through there, it's from 2011, start of AB 109, to 2015, because he did this study in 2016. He's right. That trend line does show no appreciable change in violent crime. However, if you look at it, it's only 5 years of data. That's a dubious remark in and of itself. And he ignores what was going on before that. I want to show you that. This is what his chart should have looked like. This is the UCR crime reports all the way back to 1960. You see 3 specific trends. The first one going from 1960 up to about 1992, where there was an increase of crime in the state of California, violent crime. That began to drop right about the same time the 3 strikes law was initiated. And if you see, it goes dramatically down, and then slowly starts tapering off toward the end. But it's going significantly down for over a decade when we have to get tough on crime laws. It seems to break, again, this data's quick, but it seems to break right about 2011, about the time of the institution of AB 109, to a roughly flat trend. So when he said that it hasn't shown an increase, that's true, but he's ignoring that we were on a downward slope. So it's way different than what we actually see here. So there is a problem. We killed the deductions that we were seeing before. Let's talk about Prop 47. This was billed when it came to the voters as just trying to get rid of the overly, harsh laws that were established, and that punished people like the low-level offenders. It was only going to affect the low-level offenders by decriminalizing some of the drug laws and adjusting grand theft values or felony theft values to keep pace with inflation. Seems relatively benign. They also trotted out examples of people that were convicted of felonies because they were just going to try and shoplift baby formula, from stores. And so that was what the law was intended to address. In reality, though, all of those changes were considered retroactive. What it did was it created a whole flood on the court systems of people that had been already convicted that now wanted their sentences changed, and they were immediately being let out after the heavy expenses of doing their court changes. During that time, one of the things that they said to get the name of the Safe Schools, Neighborhoods and Schools Act, was that they were going to take the money from the savings for the state and put it into local programs, and specifically like school DARE programs and drug rehab centers. Unfortunately, all of the savings, or over half the savings that they anticipated they were going to get, never materialized. As a result, Governor Brown chose to take most of the money and just throw it back into the general fund, so it didn't get there. What the end result was that drug addicts were left without proper treatment, and there was a dramatic increase in homelessness. In Hemet here, the evidence suggests that a majority of our chronic homeless are in fact drug or alcohol addictions, and this definitely makes it worse. In 2016, the USA Today published an investigative report on Prop 47's effects. They found that since it went through, that cops around the state are doing a lot less drug enforcement and making a lot less arrests, somewhere to the tune of 22,000 a year, because it's now deemed only a misdemeanor, it's not as serious. They also found at the same time that drug rehabilitation has gone to an all-time low. Why is that? Well, before, the DAs had the authority, and the prosecutors, that when you're arrested on that felony, that they could send you to a drug diversion program instead of going into the state incarceration. So they were able to hold a hammer over these people's heads, and a lot of people went with that and had that incentive to actually go through the program, get clean, and make it work to avoid that prison sentence. Unfortunately, now that Prop 47 is in, there's no longer that hammer hanging over everybody's heads, and so the drug addicts no longer have an incentive to go. And so we're actually seeing them opt out of the plans because they know that nothing's going to happen to them anyway. The other half of this is the theft side of that equation on Prop 47, which, as all of you know, most of the drug addicts resort to thievery just to get the money to buy their drugs. So these are actually two interrelated things. Before Prop 47, the limits were $400, and it was in a cumulative way. An officer could write the report to make it show that the person added up on their criminal behavior to get over $400. Also, at the same time, we would use a tool of burglary, especially with retail establishments. If someone goes into a retail establishment with the intent to steal, they could steal a pack of gum, and that was still considered a felony. What these two rules combined to do was prevent people from wanting to go in and hit a store for more than $400 and only hit them once. Well, what ended up happening was Prop 47 eliminated that whole burglary scheme. So it took it from a felony down to a misdemeanor, the same thing as a shoplift. Therefore, they could go back in and they weren't going to get more severe punishment. Also, there were some court cases that came out that said that if they were to commit that crime, they could go back to their car, dump the stuff, go back into the store with empty hands, and the dollar sign was back down to zero again. So they could figure out how to game the system and turn that into a business. And we're going to talk about an example of that here shortly. What did that do? Well, it created a phenomenon of Fed kicks. This is the way that federal overcrowding, or the federal law has hit Riverside County. See, because what happened was that Sacramento Solution, they sent all of their people, like you see on the bus, down to our little tiny